Welcome to the Homelab Show, episode 100, Why Debian 12 Bookworm is Awesome. And I'm not just joined by Jay, but also Veronica. How you doing, Jay and Veronica?
Hello.
Hey,
Uh,
good.
this is this is exciting. The Debian 12, there's a lot of hype about it, but it's definitely worth the hype. There's going to be a lot of stuff, a lot of fun things that I didn't get a chance to watch Jay's videos, and I've only looked a little bit briefly. But he's definitely got some videos covering it. But we want to talk about it on a podcast and talk about how exciting it is. But we want to get to a little bit of feedback because it's been a couple of weeks since we were here between travels and scheduling conflicts, and we're happy to be back. We're happy to be live. We're happy to see there's a lot of people watching this live right now. But the feedback, first question was the IDS and IPS, so intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems, which often are kind of the same, just a matter of how you have them configured. And will you cover it as a topic on the show? I think the answer to that is yes. I think this is something that is going to be different than what I may use in the enterprise, but it's definitely something to understand how these systems work. So it's an amazing thing to run your home lab. I've definitely used OSEC in the past, Wazoo a little bit. What about you, Jay or Veronica? Have you used either or different, or have recommendations on those tools, and which ones we should probably do a podcast about?
Not off the head. Sorry.
I've used Suricata, and I actually really like Suricata.
Suricata's nice.
I've used the built-in stuff into Unify, and I feel like I don't get quite as good of a response from it. It's more challenging to use. So
Yeah.
I tend to like Suricata. It's one thing they've got.
Yeah, and Suricata is actually what's under the hood in the Unify platform. And if you use it, for example, though, in the PF Sense platform, you get a more hands-on approach to it, because it gives you all the, it doesn't just put a pretty UI on it. It actually gives you the raw details on there.
That's what I'm after.
Yeah, lets you turn all the knobs and set your own threat intel feeds. And the first thing people will do, and I recommend doing this because it's a learning experience, you'll turn on monitor everything, and then you'll regret it. So
that's exactly it.
You'll panic thinking you're under attack, then you'll start learning really what false positives are, but it kind of teaches you how to be a security engineer, and you understand what people are looking at. So I think it's a fun topic. We'll definitely cover it on the show.
Not every alert means you're being hacked. I've had to explain that to many people.
Yes, that's why I said turn it all on at first. You just want to see it come at you. Great learning experience. The next question was basically, do you buy a ThinkPad or a System 76 laptop? And I think Jay's covered a handful of times System 76. I love Pop OS, and their goal was to run Linux on there, specifically Pop OS. And what do you think, Jay? How was those System 76 laptops?
Well, I mean, I have a bunch of them, if that tells you anything. So now, to be completely unbiased, I'm always unbiased, but I want to focus on the pros and the cons of both when I answer this. So when it comes to Lenovo, they're going to have fewer Linux running laptops. I don't remember. I know at one point they were shipping Fedora.
Yeah.
Veronica, do you remember? Are they still doing that?
I feel like they're still doing Fedora and Ubuntu, but I haven't confirmed that recently.
So I'm not sure how support would react, because you know how sometimes tech support can be when they are helping you troubleshoot something and they find Pop OS instead of Fedora or whatever it was. So I think System 76 is going to be more open to trying other distros, because they're going to get a lot of people that are running Debian. They ship Ubuntu as well. It's not just Pop OS, but you could have like someone running Arch. And they even go as far as to put some of their stuff in the AUR, like System 76 themselves, to support people. So they don't seem to care if you're running something else. And they'll even give you Windows drivers if it ends up going that direction. But you call into Lenovo, I'm just not sure how they'd react if it's something different. Now, another thing I also want to stress is that System 76 doesn't have accident coverage, if that matters to you. Like Lenovo's business support, they can actually go to you and fix your computer where you are. So I've seen people with broken screens get their screen replaced right there on site. So I feel like if you are spending that much money on a computer, it'd be great if you had on-site coverage. I don't think System 76 could ever do that, because that would be a regional thing, but at least having an accident coverage thing. Now, if you're not accident prone and you're not a klutz like I am, then it doesn't matter if you have accident coverage, because I'm sure you're not planning on dropping your computer. So I think, like Veronica said, it's just, you're going to have more support on System 76 side than Lenovo. But the build quality, in my opinion, is probably about 10% better on Lenovo's side, is my opinion. So I feel like the pros and cons kind of, I don't know. It's hard to say. It just depends on what's important to you as far as the warranty, the support, if you're
Right.
self-sufficient or not, things like that.
I've had pretty good experiences with System 76 and support, whether it's software or hardware. For me, the software support's huge, knowing that if I'm running Linux on my laptop and I have some kind of driver issue or some update borks something and I need to fix it, knowing I have somebody I can reach out to who I've paid. So there's that support. That to me, that's huge. But I
Yep.
will say I've had good experiences with them, even on the hardware side, maybe not getting me same day or next day service, but like telling me what part I need to order from, big box retailer or
Right.
whatever, so that I can actually do that replacement myself. That's been huge. And I've taken advantage of that when I've accidentally dropped something or, broken a Wi-Fi card because I was being silly while trying to open something up, that sort of thing.
And I
Yeah.
won't leave out the new framework laptops that I've been watching from not hands-on, but just watching not just Linus, but other people talk about them. Cory Doctorow recently talked greatly about them and one of his write-ups about how easy a lot of things were for swapping motherboards, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another one I would throw on the radar list because he runs Ubuntu on it and he says he found it to be very Linux compatible. So if you look up Cory Doctorow framework laptops, he's got a lot to say about them as well. So if you want someone, because Linus, being an investor in it, you may assume that he's biased, but I do also think it's a good product. So you can find other people. Maybe at some point I'll buy one. I actually went with Dell and Pop! OS runs beautifully on it. My only reason I chose a Dell is at the time I wanted a OLED screen and it wasn't
Right.
available from System 76 when I ordered. And I just was, once you've seen an OLED screen, it's a luxury once experienced. You can't go back. It's
Yeah.
becomes a necessity.
I agree. Another thing I'll mention about System 76 that I like is the fact they're a small company. And
Yes.
the reason why I say this is because, or why it matters to me, is because they're paying attention more. Like if you are a Lenovo customer, it's not that they don't appreciate your business, but it is the fact that you are one of a large number of people. So it's really, you're not going to get that one-on-one attention, which is really not something you can expect anyway. But I've seen System 76 fix things in firmware because one person mentioned it in Twitter, for example. And you don't have people watching Twitter and Reddit and things like that like System 76 does. They're paying attention, and it's not like some companies where they have a maybe a PR person that's watching. Like their employees, plural, are watching, and they just seem to be paying attention. So I think that's pretty cool that they believe in it and that they'll fix things that quickly when someone notices a problem. They
Yeah.
consider it. They don't say, "Oh yeah, it's you and not me." It's like, tell me more about that. They might have a opinion in their mind, but they're not going to jump to something until they kind of have the evidence. They look at it. So I think that also could be a benefit.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Well, moving on to the topic of the day, Debian 12 Bookworm and why it's awesome. So I'm going to let you two take the lead on this. I am a observant in this one. I'm excited because I'm a long time Debian fan. I still run Debian for a lot of my server stuff. I have a few Ubuntu things on there, but Debian 12 brings some changes to the map. So where do we start with it?
How about where we started with it as a kind of prelude? I think that'd be fun. Like what was our first experience?
1999,
Or
23 years ago,
um,
24 years ago.
so what about you, Veronica? When did you first try Debian, if you even remember?
It was a long time ago. I think if I'm remembering correctly, my first distro was Ubuntu, like back in 2005. It was, a long time ago. And then I figured out Ubuntu is based on Debian and gave it a try. And at the time I was such a noob, I couldn't figure it out. And I ended up shelving it until a little bit later. If I'm remembering correctly, my first experience with Debian was getting it going on PowerPC on some
Ooh.
old like PowerPC laptop. I don't remember if it's an old iMac or something like that. And it worked. And it was the only Linux I could get working on it. And it was like, okay, now I'm going to start experimenting with it and see what we can do.
Yeah, I started So my first distro was Red Hat 7.1 or 7.2 before RHEL. So
Yeah.
people might be thinking, well, that wasn't that long ago. Actually, it was.
No,
This
the
is
old Red Hat.
The
the
old
old
version.
Red Hat, the one that you could get in a box, like
Yes.
this thick with
Yeah.
manuals and everything. And that I think the year was like 2002 when I first started with Linux, and then sometime after that, I discovered Ubuntu. I think it was the very first release, and to be honest, I didn't like it. The first release I found was buggy. I would install another desktop environment in addition to GNOME, and then everything would just, go south. Literally the second release, like 6 months later, they fixed everything in Ubuntu and it was fine. So I started using that from that point forward. And then I remember going to work one day and, I'm still starting out. I go to the IT department for something unrelated and I noticed Linux on someone's computer and I ask about it. And he said something to me that is untrue, but maybe it was true back then. I don't quite remember how Debian changed over the years. But I asked what he liked about it. He said that it's a rolling distribution. You install once and upgrade forever. And that was the first
Right.
time in my career I have ever heard that being spoken. So I've never even, I don't remember when Arch started, but I know for sure I at least never heard of Arch back then. And that's something you generally hear about. And it's not true. Debian's not a rolling release. It can be semi-rolling depending on which branch you go with, but maybe it's true back then. I don't know. But there was something novel about the idea that I could just install something and keep, and maybe what he was referring to is the fact that the upgrades in Debian are so seamless that you could just keep rolling through the releases. But I thought it was great, but I just never went away from Ubuntu because I felt like, oh, that's more work. And Ubuntu was like Debian, but they kind of just did all that for me and I can get up and running quicker. But later on, I tried Debian and I loved it, but I also was frustrated with it because of all the extra things you have to do to get Debian working well that Ubuntu just did for you. And that was why I went the Ubuntu direction. But as we'll talk later, I kind of came back around to the Debian side, especially with this new release.
Oh, this
Yeah.
new release is so good.
It's one of the best ever. If
It's
not the best,
so
it is great.
good.
So I was doing mail server administration on Red Hat, but every time we had constant dependency problems, is which when we get to the opportunity came around 2001 to rebuild the mail server, Debian it was. And
Yep.
the first time I realized you could just apt install something and all the dependencies would come with it and not have to chase down a bunch of RPM packages and solve
Yeah.
incompatibilities between them. That was and back in those days, the early Red Hat days, there was some debate about where you saved things. Debian was pretty strict. There is no debate. You will put your config files under /etc.
Yes.
You will put them where they belong, and that's something that helped me a lot because sometimes the problems I would have, we would have Tripwire, if you ever remember that. I think it might still exist. At the time, it was an open source project to let you know if someone had touched a file or logged in or any changes. And one of the problems was you were trying to get a configuration, but the Red Hat version would save the config somewhere else. So you're playing with this. You're like, I changed this parameter. Why is it not working? You're like, oh, it puts one here, but then it copies it over here, but doesn't use a symbolic link. And Debian doesn't allow such nonsense.
Yes.
And
Right.
it was, yeah. Once I got over that, I was like, okay, this is my new favorite Linux distro. And I'm sorry, Red Hat, you lost me at that. I know things have changed in the last 20 years, but we're Linux people. We have biases from the first distros we touch.
The worst part. So when I became a COBOL dev and started doing system administration for COBOL on Linux, COBOL almost always requires Red Hat or one of its clones, and it was a real learning curve for me figuring out that there's lots of different places they put things compared with Debian. Debian always felt very strict and very specific, and Red Hat's got its own things and its own conventions, and it's a relearning. It's not like a brand new system. It's not like suddenly switching to a BSD or something, but it definitely was a thing. And I always missed that when I'm doing system administration. It's like if I'm on a RHEL system, I'm like, oh, I wish this was Debian because I know how to fix this on Debian. I know how to do this on Debian. It does feel like Debian's kind of, at least for a lot of people, the standard. I know other people disagree. That's you do you.
Another thing I thought I'd bring up to see if you guys remember this.
Never used it.
So
never used it. I remember hearing about it.
So when I was on Ubuntu, when I first moved to Ubuntu from Red Hat, I kind of missed Red Hat a little bit because that's what I started with. So Fedora, which, Red Hat on the desktop became Fedora. So I came back to Fedora to check it out. And I just felt like I liked apt better than, the package manager on there. So apt for RPM came out, which is a port of apt for Fedora or Red Hat, which you could apt install. And it was the weirdest thing ever, and it would work. It was like completely seamless. Like whatever you typed in apt, it would translate that to the system and do whatever it's supposed to do. So I was just running that. Eventually, I think apt for RPM went away, and I just thought I'd bring that up to see if you guys remember it, because it's one of those. It was a short life, I think, but it was
Hmm.
an interesting thing to see a package manager that's not meant for a distribution be ported over to that distro so people could use it there. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think it shows that we've always had this idea around package management and trying to create grand unified theories of package management. And this is
Yep.
nothing new. We talk about Flatpak and Snap and all these new things, but like we've been shooting for this for a good long while now, and
Yeah.
and
Yep.
it will probably never hit grand unified theory of Linux, and that's okay, because I don't know that we need a grand unified theory of
No, I don't
Linux.
think we do.
I think it's fun even with its different quirks and idiosyncrasies. So
Yes.
Speaking of quirks, I'll just talk about some of the reasons why I haven't been using Debian that have been kind of holding me back. And this isn't a criticism of Debian now, so no one get upset. This is they fixed all of this, so which is going to be something that we talk about. But there was this frustration I would always have with Debian that things were harder than they needed to be. It wasn't that I didn't know how to do
mhm.
it. I knew how to do all the stuff. All I have to do is Google it, write down the steps. I keep really good notes. So if I have to do something again, I know how to do it. I just go back to my notes. So Wi-Fi drivers, GPU drivers, and all of that have been an issue for a long time. So I remember one time I was installing Debian on a ThinkPad that had no Ethernet port. It was Wi-Fi only.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure it was an X1 Carbon, if I remember correctly. It had a dongle, an Ethernet dongle that it came with, but I didn't know where it was. I couldn't find it. So I'm installing Debian, and of course, it doesn't have a driver for the Wi-Fi card. And it's net install. So what am I going to do? It has no way to net. There's no way to get on the internet. So what I did was I just got a flash drive, went over to another computer, and I found the package I needed. And okay, I moved it over there. I said, hey, look in this on the flash drive for the thing for the Wi-Fi driver didn't work. There's a dependency for that deb. So darn it, I have to go back over to the machine, grab this other file, and eventually I just extracted the deb package, found the firmware files for the Wi-Fi card, and I just copy them over to the appropriate place mid-install through a TTY, just to give it the Wi-Fi drivers to get the net thing working so I can get it installed, and it worked fine. And after that, I installed NVIDIA, worked fine. But the problem was I felt like I should not have had to do any of that. It should have just worked out of the box. And the issue, and the reason why we keep talking about this, is because proprietary hardware is bad, because it basically means that the developers of the distribution have no visibility into the code. Because if someone says, my NVIDIA card is failing me, well, go contact NVIDIA. We can't see the source code. We can let them know about the problem, but it's an issue, and it's a political issue. And Debian, being conservative, they'll just keep that stuff off the ISO image. There's also fears of, like, I don't know if it's quite a fear, but a possibility of lawsuits or just conflicting licenses. There's always been that. So they'd keep the packages off the ISO. And my opinion has always been, I understand Linux people, we get this. We understand why it's a concern. It's important to us. But the average user, they don't give a crap. They want their hardware to work. They're not trying to hear about politics. They're not trying to hear about anything. They just want their hardware to work. But um, Debian just made everyone jump through those hoops, while Ubuntu, based on Debian, just took all care of all of that for you. So it wasn't like I couldn't do it. It was that I didn't feel like I should have to, and no one else should have to deal with this. This is not our problem. Debian, you figure this out. Bang the drum wherever you need to bang it, but don't punish us, is what my mindset was.
I think this is where Ubuntu really took the advantage by simply a
Yep.
checkbox. Load these proprietary
Yep.
things. Would you like them to work? Check the box on install. Great, because it was never as obvious how to do that in Debian.
The other issue that I ran into, and this is not a Debian specific problem, by the way. This is something that I experienced like early on in my Linux career, and I look at this and I'm like, why is it this way? So I would install Ubuntu, and I remember it was the second release ever of Ubuntu, and I'm forgetting the name. Was it Hoary Hedgehog or Warty Warthog? I can't remember which direction they went. Um, but anyway, a new version of OpenOffice came out at the time, and I asked a Linux person at work, okay, the new OpenOffice is out. How do I get that? And he's like, you don't. I'm like, what? What do you mean? Like, it's out. It's like, yeah, but it's not going to be out until the next Ubuntu release. And I'm thinking, wait, I have to wait an entire release of the operating system just to have the latest word processor? That doesn't make sense. Windows users are able to download it and install it right now. Mac users can do the same thing. At least I think it was out for Mac. But anyway, the point is we have software that comes out on a website. Windows and Mac users can download it, install it, and it's fine. But we Linux users are strangely okay with the fact that we'll never get the newest version until the entire operating system. Imagine not being able to download the latest version of OBS because you need to upgrade to Windows 12, but that hasn't come out first. What? So there was this whole system that I thought was just really horrible when it comes to software delivery. And I think where it hits Debian is Ubuntu is a 6-month release cadence. Debian is closer to 2 years. So that's a lot longer of a time to spend with those older pieces of software. And nowadays, as we'll talk later, Veronica just mentioned, we have Flatpak and all these other things that make this largely, or actually pretty much not an issue at all, because we're separating user apps from system packages, which is something that I've been feeling should have been the case since 2002 when I discovered Linux.
For me, the performance of Flatpak in Debian has been stellar. I've been, I use Pop OS on my main work machine that I do for work still, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, just right now. But for my editing rig and my video games and like the other things that I do, like streaming, I'm streaming right now from Debian, and it's been absolutely fantastic. It's been FlatHub has been stellar for this particular experience. Now, will it continue to be with the political issues around it? And if places don't support Flatpak the same way and you have to go with a snap, I mean, I could see Debian having issues for folks who need something that isn't found in either of those places. But for a lot of people, I think it's becoming a recommend for me. It's something, and part of that is the installer updates that have just made it so much easier to actually install, where I used to describe Debian as harder than Arch. I think 2 years ago I said, Debian is actually harder than Arch to install because Arch has the wiki and you can get every single answer. Whereas Debian's website was at the time a complete mess of, I don't know which ISO I need. I don't know what version I need. Like, do I need this for this hardware? There's no simple checkbox. It's like I almost need a wizard. And that's done now. I've thrown this Debian ISO at everything I can, every laptop, every desktop, every virtual machine. I've tried breaking things. I've tried it all seems to work. So
yeah, it's also it's so great and it's so thoughtful. Like it's creating work in a way, but saving work for me because I still notice things. So my Ansible config, I built something in there that basically it's a systemd service that'll update your Flatpaks automatically every night. And that's what it does. Now, I didn't get around to running that on my Debian installs yet, but then I log into my test machine, which I installed nothing on. This is just what I record footage on. I must have recorded a Flatpak. I think I did that when I recorded a Flatpak video recently. And then I log in and it says that my Flatpaks are updated. I'm like, that's interesting. I didn't add my config to this. So there must be either something in Flatpak that Flatpak did to make that automatic, or maybe Debian put an interface in there. I don't know what it was, but it took care of that for me. So now it's like, I need to go to my Ansible config and put an exception that if the target is Debian, don't even bother, putting this config over there because it already does that for you. And I think that's novel just to have a, automatically updating Flatpaks. And before anyone asks, yes, you can lock Flatpak versions to the current version that's installed if you don't want that. So it's easy to work around if that's not what you want. But that's just there's all these pleasant surprises that we find in these releases after using them, even after a review.
Well, and I think this is a good place to really dive into
Yep.
specifically Debian 12. How much
Debian
better is
12.
the installer? What are some of the really key features that make it so much better than some of the reminiscing we did of problems on some of the other ones?
I installed over I used net install over Wi-Fi. So that
Ooh.
just that sentence, I think is a game changer. And now here's the thing. So just so people are aware, you were always able to do this. There was a non-free ISO that they offered, but they'd never advertised it, and most people didn't know it existed. In fact, I never knew it existed until somebody in one of my videos commented to let me know that it existed. So it was an unofficial, like something like Debian with non-free software ISO. I don't know how they worded it, but when I used that, it was fine. But now the standard Debian ISO image will have proprietary firmware on there that will be installed if it's found that it's needed when you go to install the distribution, which makes, I feel like what this does is it lowers the barrier of entry for beginners to check out Debian, because before, it's like my friend Bob said that Linux is the best thing ever and runs on everything. I tried it and I can't even get Wi-Fi to work. Linux sucks. I'm back to Windows. That's usually how it would go. But now, you have that out of box experience where your hardware works, which I feel like is just going to make it more popular for Linux users of all kinds. You have experts answering fewer questions, and you have beginners having fewer questions.
I just checked out the Debian website for download, and this was always one of my big criticisms of Debian is you would have to go to the alternate download site, and then it would give you so many different options. You got not only the net install, but the full install. And how do you know which one is the one you want? Then you have Jigdo. What is Jigdo? Do we use Jigdo? Is that a thing you use? Like, there's all these different options.
Sounds like a board game made by Milton Bradley, honestly.
Yep, you have. Do you need the CD or the DVD of the stable or testing? Do you need it? And for folks who've been in this, you can kind of get a feel for it. But if you haven't been in this is entirely overwhelming compared with virtually every other distro today. And they've really taken a ton of time to just make that look better. I still think they've got some work to do on the website, just in terms of making it, organized and friendly for beginners. Because I think Debian could get there. I think with this release, especially, they're really getting close to a beginner-friendly distro. I don't know if I would say it's perfect yet, but it's getting real close, and I'm excited about that. And because we every distro, like, ideally, most distros ought to be beginner friendly. I don't know if Gentoo needs to be beginner friendly, but most distros need to be beginner friendly, because with the proliferation of distros comes those moments like Jay was talking about of confusion with new folks who they download Debian and think it represents all of Linux, not realizing that you'd have a far easier time with Linux Mint or Pop! OS or Ubuntu. And I would like to see more simplified entry points. And I think Debian is just getting so close with this release.
I completely agree. And then the other issue with and here's the thing, we're on episode 100 and we're talking about a distribution that has packages that are 100 years old, generally. And that's been an issue for a while, is that Debian, in my opinion, feels stale right at release and then continues to be the case, and even worse so later. But the Flatpak thing really helps that out, because, and I mentioned this in the review, Debian 12 ships with a version of LibreOffice that the developers of LibreOffice don't want you to use. They literally tell you, stop using 7.4. They've had several point releases of 7.5, and they're telling you to move to that. It's stable enough now, but Debian ships the very version that they don't want you to keep using. And that's just something you'll find across the board. Nowadays, with this release, we have the latest Plasma desktop, which is awesome. We have the second to latest GNOME. So it's newer than most of the time. It's just, it just feels stale because your packages would be so old on release day and then would continue to age. But Flatpak, if you need something newer, you can go grab it. If you'd rather leave everything stable, you can do that, not update anything. But if you have that one piece of software, you can go grab it. and it's pretty easy to do. And I think LibreOffice is definitely something that no distribution on the planet should ever put in their repositories. I know that might not be a popular opinion, but Microsoft Office continues to develop. They continue to add new features and change things. LibreOffice also updates regularly to keep up with those changes. So if you're using an older version of LibreOffice, or even one that's not old but is locked, it's going to get to a point where you're going to have issues with people running Microsoft Office, sending you a document, you open it, it gets corrupted. Why? Because, and many people think it's because of LibreOffice compatibility. Most of the time, it's because your distribution's given you an older version. I feel like Flatpak should be the only way to get LibreOffice. Flatpak, Snap, maybe put them in all of those, an app image even, but at least keep it out of the repositories. But again, I think the point here is that Flatpak makes this largely not an issue at all. So even the classic Jurassic package dates of the Debian packages is just not even something that's going to be a problem at all either. So without that problem, it's like I'm running out of things to complain about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I will say with Debian, I'm working on some testing before I upgrade some of my Debian 11 environments to Debian 12. One of the reasons I was always hesitant with Debian in like web servers, like PHP specifically, is that it was at the time, challenging to like convince a company to install the non-official repo for like the most recent PHP.
Right.
And getting this configured and set up was really challenging. I'm interested to see how Debian 12 compares because I have a sneaking suspicion at release day it's better than Debian 11 was at release day for that particular use. Right now, I don't have anybody who's actively asking me to deploy a Debian 12 on a web server, but that could change in a week. Who knows? So I'm super excited to see exactly how that's going to end up working. You can do goofy things like pinning and development stuff, but when you're trying to convince the C-suite that that's worth the investment compared with something like Ubuntu, which makes that simpler, it's been kind of challenging.
I feel like Debian 12 isn't going to do a whole lot to fix that because one mindset that people will have is just put it all in a container. That's not always the answer. It's not always going to work. It could work, but
Yeah.
not always. I feel like surprisingly, RHEL has potentially the best solution to this. And I can't remember what they call it, but you could literally choose the version of PHP that the repositories will give you. So you can move it to a specific version right in the repository config. They have a whole feature for this. And I don't use RHEL every day, so I can't remember what it's called. But I feel like if Debian just maybe in the next release did that, then that would probably solve it because you could just, I want PHP, whatever the version is. I'll just put whatever the config is for that. And I have that version. That's what I have. But you'll probably still run into, that version is too high for this other application, which is why I feel like a lot of these things should be taken out of the repositories and put separate. But I think with what Debian has achieved, they've done. So here's the thing. Debian has achieved more in the release of Debian 12 by itself than they have in the entire distribution's history. Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to I'm talking specifically about being user friendly. Obviously, over the 30 years, I mean, they've done all kinds of things to revolutionize, Linux in general. But when it comes to, making it easier for the user, they've done more in this one release than the entire history of the entire distribution.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
I mean, the fact that they're shipping with, you said, second to the latest GNOME and then the latest Plasma desktop, that's a big step forward because that's not something I would have expected out of the Debian distributions.
And I think it was just barely the newer version of GNOME, I think, was just barely over the date. I think it was kind of close enough to where people were like thinking it could happen. Plasma was already out at the time. So I think that's great. Now, what I'll shift gears and talk about myself, and I think, Veronica, you have a lot of thoughts on this too, because we've chatted about this. The bombshell thing I dropped at the end of the review where I said I'm switching to it. And I'm going to have a dedicated video about this. And maybe I figured I talk about some of the reasons why I made that decision, and that'll kind of help people understand my mindset. Now, the thing is, I'm not a fan of drama. It is especially challenging in Linux sometimes because I see someone asking a question in a Linux forum and some of them, and they'll just get like assaulted almost. It's like, there's some of this going on, and there's just drama, and I just don't like drama. Now, when it comes to covering Linux, you're always going to have the drama. There's no way to get out of it because you have to be in it to report on it. You have to be in it to know about it, to know what's going on and how it's going. So I'm still in with the drama, but at the same time, it's when I'm with my own systems and I want to manage my own stuff, there comes a time where, okay, my workday is over and I just want to, play around or update some things and just have some fun with my own system. And then I look up things and I'm still dealing with drama because of the snap package thing and Canonical's doing this, Canonical's doing that. And I don't know what they're going to do. Well, I kind of do know because I know some things that, the public doesn't know, but still, I think most of it has come out now. There's just all this, excuse me, infighting about Debian, or not Debian, but Ubuntu. And I just get tired of it. Like I cover it all day long. And at night, I'm going to also continue to deal with it. No, I think it just comes a point where I just want the drama to be outside. I just want the thing that is quiet, it works, and I have to deal with all of that. But the other thing is, without knowing what Canonical is going to do next, they're a company, and I'm not saying anything they're doing is wrong, because it's their distribution. Companies exist to make money. That's why they exist. So I'm not saying, Ubuntu is doing something wrong here because Canonical is a company. They're going to do company things. I also feel that if people use Ubuntu, they choose to use Ubuntu. They've chosen to use a distribution backed by a company. And I feel like they forfeit the right to complain because they chose to use the thing that everyone knows is made by a company. But Debian is like Ubuntu without the company is kind of how the best to describe it. It's a community project, but you
I
still
was
have.
about to say that.
Yep. So that's a great thing too. But as a business, like I don't want to have a situation where, oh gosh, Canonical just crossed the line. Now I definitely have to switch all of my systems over at the last minute. But it's like, that day is going to come eventually. I'm just going to switch it now. And I switched all of the servers over, not all of them. The public facing servers are still on Ubuntu. I haven't decided if I'm going to convert those now or just let them age out and then move to Debian later. But that's kind of where I'm at with all of this. But when it comes to the book, I'm still going to support the book. I still might write a new edition. I'm not going to stop covering Ubuntu. It exists. It's just the difference is what I'm running internally, but I'm always going to have Ubuntu installations because I have to keep up on what they're doing. I have to do the tutorials and the reviews and keep you guys updated. And I can only do that if I'm using it. But
Right.
when it comes to my core systems, it's like, okay, those are Debian. That's just going to be stable and solid and just not move for a while. So nothing against Canonical. I do feel like the whole push for Snap is anti-community in my opinion, but
Yes.
and that's the other reason too, is I feel like there's a conflict of interest with the channel. I'm not Learn Ubuntu TV. I'm Learn Linux TV. Linux, Linux the thing, not just Ubuntu. So if Ubuntu is doing something that I feel like is toxic towards the community by forcefully making Snap, not Snap on account of its own self being great, it's not working. It's not getting traction against Flatpak, so they're forcing it. So it's like, excuse me, Michigan allergies. So the fact is, I get tired of that. Honestly, it just gets old, and not Debian old. I mean, like tedious old.
Yeah, I brought this up in my Graylog
Idiot.
tutorial, and it's one of the challenges that I didn't know people were having because I was building it on Debian. But if you go through and you install Ubuntu server and you apt-get install Docker, it's fine. But if you choose when you're building your Ubuntu server and check the box, like, hey, I'd like Docker, a little menu there come up on the installer, it's going to install things in Snap. And that comes with a new set of challenges, the way you manage Docker. And of course, the errors are you don't have permission to do this. So it doesn't immediately tell the user why they don't have permissions. And it's because it's the way you have to add certain parameters to Snap. So it kind of creates some different challenges. And that's one of the problems I've run into more recently with it. Like you're making a kind of a core change that this tutorial should work on really any flavor of Linux, but you've decided to throw a little monkey wrench in there and with your installer without saying, hey, we're installing the Snap version of it. And that's those little challenges sometimes, as you said, Jay, are not necessarily in line with the community.
Right. And the last thing I'll say about this, because you got to get Veronica's thoughts on this too, because I think she kind of came to the same conclusion as I did separately, which is kind of interesting. The thing that I think is surprising to me is Canonical doesn't know this. I think everybody in the Linux community knows this, which is surprising that Canonical doesn't. And what I'm referring to is that first impressions in Linux are eternal. You don't release something to, public scrutiny unless it is ready for that. So I feel like if they had held Snap back and then kept making it great and fixed everything before it became the default, then everyone's opinion would probably be more positive than it is now. And it probably would even succeed. But, they put it out with Firefox, taking like 10 seconds to load, which has been fixed. That's been fixed. It's not a problem now. But it already had a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because of the problems with it. And then that's another problem. They pretty much guaranteed that Snap will never succeed. It will never succeed. And I'm not saying that I want Canonical to fail. I don't want anyone to fail. I want things to succeed. I want it to be great for everybody. But by deciding to put it out there, in its unfinished state, they have permanently soured the opinion. The only way that they could make it successful now is to change the name, the same product, but fix it, change the name, and then people might accept it. But if it's called Snap, it's just not going to be successful, and they will have to switch to Flatpak at some point in the future. It could be 5 years from now. It could be, the next release. It won't be the next release, but at some point they're going to realize that this uphill battle that they caused themselves is just a never-ending hill they have to climb.
I mean, Unity took off.
Well,
everyone
hated it.
That's a joke. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you say that, but
and eventually they took it out.
Yes.
Took it out, right. Yep,
companies make company decisions, and companies make company decisions because they're after something that isn't community. That's
right.
that is what it is. And I'm not saying I think that that's a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's part of how this works. I'm not saying I use Debian because it's a community thing, because while that definitely weighs into my kind of thought process around it, I also know that there's a lot of large organizations supporting this project and supporting Linux in general. It would be naive to suggest that Linux is free of corporate drama. It's definitely not. And it's naive to say that Debian packaging is free from drama, because it's not. There's stuff going on there. And all of these different areas have their little quirks. My concern about Ubuntu and Snap is one of groundswell, where we're seeing for the first time that at least I remember a general consensus forming around Flatpak and FlatHub specifically. And that's beautiful. And Ubuntu is getting in the way of it. And that just feels nasty. Now, I will confess, I actually think Snap is pretty cool technology under the hood. And I do think there's some neat stuff going on there, particularly around server application development and, like issues like, I just recently installed for a customer a Kanban board, and like with a Snap, it's incredibly slick and it works really well, and they're having no issues with it, and probably saved me hours of deployment time. Yeah, it was fantastic, and like when it works, it works. I have concerns about who's supporting it and who's managing it, and whether that's a community project or a corporate project. Particularly since I have a sneaking suspicion Canonical will not continue to be a independent company forever. At their size, I'm waiting for that Microsoft Canonical.
Everyone is.
Everyone's waiting.
You can't find anyone take bets against you on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And that's my concern right now, is that I like Snap as a project, and I fine. It is what it is, and I don't hate it or anything like that. Like people get so amped up about it, and I get the logic behind the emotion, because we're seeing groundswell for the first time, and it's like we could actually, especially with Steam Deck and with all these places supporting Flatpak and the move toward immutability, and how that could be a really good and powerful tool. And Ubuntu's kind of in the way. And it's horrible.
Something you reminded me of that I should probably mention too, because I don't think this got a lot of traction, and this is something I'm going to cover in a video. I had to screenshot these pages on Canonical's website, or some of them were there, and some of them were in blogs where Mark Shuttleworth was quoted, because you brought up the whole Unity thing and that going away. And this is kind of where my next point is, where my problem is you have Canonical saying one thing and doing another. Okay. And that, to me, if you're a company, that's fine. Companies do company things, but companies need to be held to the word also. That's kind of like the honor system here. If a company does one thing or says one thing and does another, that's bad. And there's several times where this happened where I was using Ubuntu GNOME before GNOME was the default desktop environment again. They were currently Unity. They had an officially recognized flavor called Ubuntu GNOME, and it gave you a vanilla GNOME. Nothing, added to it. Exactly GNOME as GNOME's developers intended. Now, when they decided to drop Unity, that essentially meant Ubuntu GNOME became the main version, and they even dropped that version. And then Mark Shuttleworth said that he wants to focus on, and I'll have the exact quote in my video, but he wants to focus on giving people the software as the developers intended, giving people GNOME as GNOME intended. That's what he said. That he said that that's what they're going to do, meaning, GNOME, like Fedora does GNOME, where it's GNOME as the developers intended. That's what he wanted. First release of GNOME-based Ubuntu comes out, they made it look like Unity. Custom theme, puts a panel on the left. They completely changed everything. So it absolutely was not GNOME as GNOME intended. So that wasn't true. And it wasn't even like a year later they went back on it. It was like months later when the next release came out. It was completely opposite of what he said. But then when he also talked about Unity not taking off or gathering steam, he said what Ubuntu wants to do is let the industry decide what's successful. He said that the software will be judged on its merits, and we think that that's how a software should succeed, is the community has chosen to elevate that. What did he do? They go against the community. They do Snap. They do their own thing. So again, he's going against what he said they would do. The other more recent thing was, Ubuntu flavor leads were free to include whatever software they want. And it says it on the website still to this day. And I've screenshotted it because I know they'll take it down. And, because they're basically saying if a person wants to release Ubuntu with a different set of packages, they're allowed to do that. And here, what did they do? They told all the flavor leads that they're not allowed to use Flatpak. And that goes against the verbiage that's on this website right now. So even as a company, and I'm a business, I'm having trouble trusting them. And if I'm using Canonical software, they're essentially a partner, maybe not officially, but if I'm using their software, then I'm not going to use something that the company constantly says one thing and then does something else. I don't think that's going to build trust, and trust is important.
Companies are going to do company things.
Exactly right.
And sometimes that company thing is aligned, sometimes it's not. And you just kind of have to not listen to what they say, but watch what they do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
How did you arrive at Debian 12, and what are you using now?
I'm actually not using Debian 12 anymore. I've been using Debian 12 in the form of Debian testing for probably 2 months now, and I love it. Like, it's great. It's fantastic. I've been using it for my editing rig as well as for gaming and streaming. This thing we're doing right now, and it's pretty great. It's honestly stellar. I decided to give it a try mainly because what's happening with Pop! OS, and they're going to be basically re-engineering how Pop! OS works, which is cool, and I'm excited about it. Like, I think it's a good thing. When it comes to my editing rig, I don't necessarily want to be going in that direction yet. I'm going to want to give it a try on my other machines and see how it's working. And, I don't necessarily want the channel's video cadence to suffer for that, because there's already so much in the way of videos. I don't want this to be in the way as well. Now, I will say, last night, I decided I only live once, and I upgraded to SID. And so now that you are seeing me live from SID. This is a SID machine now, and it's wonderful. Mainly, my reasons for that are experimentation right now at this particular stage in in Debian's development, but also there were some packages I wanted to try, and it was just easier if I just upgrade the whole thing to SID right now. So will I stay here forever? I don't know. I'm probably going to be trying. I'll give I know I'll give Pop OS, the new Pop OS, once it comes out, an honest and sincere try. And if I love it and it's great, I might switch to that. Right now, I'm trying to get Sway going on this thing and learning a window manager. Oh my goodness.
It's so fun when you get there, because I've been an open box user for so long. It's probably still my favorite, but I guess my problem with it is that it's not, I don't know if it's abandoned, because it's like, what all do you need to change in it, right? It's tried and true, and it's been, it works, but it doesn't, we've had high DPI displays take over, and it's just not there. Whereas Sway,
open box is tough.
Yeah, I think Sway is going to be more likely to work well, and I'm also trying that too. So it's kind of funny. You mentioned that. I'm like, I've been playing with that too. I've been trying to get a video out for that for like a freaking year. But I swear I'm going to be able to get it done now eventually. But I'm giving it an honest try again, because I like it. It's just every time I try it, I get sidetracked. But so far, Sway's been awesome.
Yep, I've got to figure, if I can figure out how to configure streaming. And so my rig that I'm using right now is actually, it's KD. I switched back to KD Plasma, but it's Plasma with Wayland, and everything's working. It's all Debian, Plasma, Wayland 5.27. It's working. Everything, it's all good. Lots of flat packs. It's fantastic. Switching to Sway, for whatever reason, I can't figure out any streaming, any screen sharing, any capture. I'm still in the middle of building that out.
I think OBS should work, because I'm pretty sure they support Wayland now, if I'm not mistaken.
They do. I'm using it right now, but not in Sway for whatever reason. So I think there's got to be something I'm missing, and I'll get there. I'll figure it out eventually, or I won't, and that'll be a learning curve. But
I think there's so many Sway fans. I think you've pretty much guaranteed that someone's going to write in with a config.
Oh yeah, no, that's why I'm talking about it. If you or someone has a good Sway config, please write to me.
And me too.
explainer@vkc.sh is my email, please.
And also to me as well. Just the disclaimer: I'm making a video, so I'm not going to lie. Whatever you send me can and will be used in said video. But if you have some configs or whatever, if you send it to Veronica, you say, hey, Jay can have this too. You have to have your permission first, and then maybe I'll also check it out.
Nope. I have to figure out a way to publish my dot files, because I've been avoiding doing it for a good long while. Because so much of it, like, it's peppered with comments about people, and I probably shouldn't share that. But I'm trying to separate
that. I should probably talk to you about offline.
It's going to be fun. Well, eventually you'll be able to get dot files from me, and that'll be helpful, because I've been using so many terminal like I do my email in the terminal. It's great. It's fantastic. Highly recommend it.
What app are you using for that?
I use Mutt in the terminal.
Mutt, yes.
I use Mutt and Proton Mail, and it works. It's fine. It's all good. It's just fine.
You need to do a video on Mutt. I haven't used Mutt in a long time.
Oh, I'm planning a whole video on Mutt. I watch most YouTube from MPV and subscribe using Newsboat, and it's just fantastic. It's like I barely have to touch my mouse. It's great.
These are all great topics.
I think some config file sharing and collaboration.
That would be fun.
The funnest thing. I feel like there should be like a such thing, and maybe there is going to be now, a dot file party where you just get like a bunch of people together that have like customizations that made to Vim, Tmux, whatever it is, like any software, and just
that's going to be fun.
So other people, I want that config, and then everyone just borrows this, borrows that from other people. I used to do that at work all the time. I think
that's
dot
great.
file party would be fun.
Yeah, that would be a blast. We got to talk offline about that. I got ideas for you.
Yeah, I think we need a whole video of how Veronica uses the internet. So.
Oh, geez.
I'm a Commodore 64, no less.
Right now I'm trying to get a FIC 20 on the internet. That's gonna be my next big retro getting on the internet. I'm setting up a serial modem. I'm building my own thing. It's all kinds of fun.
Yeah.
If you make me something for my Commodore 64, I don't care if it's a Pi or whatever it is to load games, I will pay you. Just let me know.
Oh, we'll talk offline. I got options for you. I've got
Cool.
options for you.
Yeah, I have some
Awesome.
retro goals as well, so I'm I'm excited.
I'm the retro whisperer now, apparently.
Yep.
I am like literally in a room with like, there's my 64, there's my Amiga 1200, there's my 500, there's my VIC 20, down here's my other VIC 20. It's what I do for fun. What can I say?
It's a great hobby. And maybe I'll start developing games on a Commodore 64. That might be fun too.
Yeah. I would love that. That'd be a blast. So somebody asked, and one of my subscribers from Ko-fi, I think, asked in the comments what my favorite language is, if it's not COBOL. And COBOL is not my favorite language. It's a language I know. It's what I do. It's not necessarily what I enjoy. If I had to pick a favorite language personally, it's probably BASIC. It's like we got to go way back because it was my first, and I still think in BASIC. BASIC is pretty much my thing. If I'm picking a favorite language in the universe today, I love Python because I love teaching Python. I love teaching Python. I used to do trainings like enterprise trainings where I would teach people how to write Python scripts. And it was one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. It is a blast. Because Python, people can grab it so quickly and they just, they can learn, and you see that spark. And then, I find out 2 years later, they got a job in IT later on. And it's like, I can help with that. That's fantastic. So Python, I love what Python does for people. Should everybody write in Python? I don't know, but Python's a great language as a language to learn.
I would recommend Pygame for all beginners.
Yeah.
And there's a book, I don't remember the title off the top of my head, but something like creating arcade games in Python or something. I think it has a cartoon snake on the cover, but there's in my opinion no better or more fun way to learn programming than a game development book, especially one with Pygame. It's very entry level, because I feel like in some ways understanding programming is easier with game development, because you have your development book that's like, here's how you write a mortgage calculator, and then you have to stay awake through the whole thing. And then a game design book is like, here's how you create a Pong clone. Okay, now that's more exciting, and I'm going to focus on that more and learn it quicker. So that's a recommendation to learn Debian. Is not Debian. I'm gonna have Debian on the brain. Python with Python's library Pygame.
Yes, which you can do on Debian.
Yeah.
So
you brought it back. All right. I think we've covered all of this as much as we have time for, at least.
Yep, I think so.
All
this
right.
is a blast. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I did see someone bring up Pascal. I learned Turbo Pascal after BASIC, so that's it's been a while. I'm going to learn some new languages. That's on my to-do list, like to try to be proficient at one of them. So not just kind of dabble in them. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks everyone for the feedback and the engagement, the interaction. And thanks, Veronica, for joining me. And Jay, we'll definitely have you on again. Subscribe to Veronica Explains, because I know she's going to do this whole, you already have one about getting your Commodore 64 online. So I know there's going to be some more content around some of the other classic stuff. And of course, you're going to have the dot files. So we'll leave links to that in the description where you can find her channel. Not hard to find, though. Veronica Explains is pretty easy to find on the YouTubes. And feedback at the homelab.show. We love hearing from you. Love hearing the feedback, and tell us what you think. And we'll be back next week because we're back on our normal cadence again. So thanks everyone.
See you around.
Thank you. Bye.